I'm always being interrupted by that. I'm hoping that everybody can hear me. If you can, please type into the chat window that you can. Yes, I'm getting yeses. Good. Yes, and please let us know where you're coming from in the chat window as well. Again, as I was going to say, this is today's session of Writing X Tech, which is our virtual conference on the writing mindset, during which we are exploring what the writing mindset is and how to get ourselves and our students to adopt it. We're starting at the top of the hour. We had some issues that we had to deal with, so I'm sorry that we're a little bit delayed. But just to find out a little bit more about our audience, I'd like to give you all a little poll here to understand where you teach and work. If you could please answer that quickly. It seems we have some people from four-year schools, from graduate schools, and some nice representation from high school and two-year schools. So that is very good to see. And let me just move over to one more poll. How familiar are you with Turnitin? Quite a few people who have used Turnitin, good to know, and some who know a little bit about it, and some who are definitely pros. Excellent, excellent. Well, as I said, today is today's first session for Writing X Tech, the writing mindset. My name is Sean Tupa. I shall be your host. And today's session is titled Beyond Integrity, Why We Cite. We encourage all of you to share your thoughts and insights about this session on social media. If you would like to tweet out during this or other sessions, please use the hashtag WritingXTech. We would like to see all of your thoughts out there in the interwebs. And I would also like to encourage all of you to complete the webcast survey that will be sent out to you following our talk. An email will be sent out with a link to the survey, a certificate of participation, and a link to the recording of the session for your viewing pleasure at a later time. But the survey is really key. It gives us very good information on how to improve our sessions. And in addition, we will be picking one lucky winner each day during Writing X Tech from the pool of users who complete the survey. The prize, Turnitin, will fund any project that user chooses on DonorsChoose.org up to $100. So please feel free to fill that out. And then also, as I see that many people have already used it and realized, that chat window on the left-hand side of your screen, please feel free to enter your questions and comments throughout the presentation. In it, we would like to have an engaging conversation about today's topic. Our guest speaker may answer the questions right away, but if not, we will definitely get to the questions at the end of the presentation. So let's talk about and move on to the presentation itself. Today's session is titled, as I said, Beyond Integrity, Why We Cite. And during the next half hour or so, our guest presenter will be sharing with us his thoughts on the importance of academic integrity and citation, not from a punitive or an enforcement perspective, but from a standpoint on how to communicate its benefits to students. Our speaker today is Michael Goodwin. Michael is the Assistant Director for Academic Integrity and an alum of Kennesaw State University, and has been a member of the Student Conduct and Academic Integrity Department since 1999. In addition to overseeing academic integrity initiatives at KSU, he regularly presents best practices in academic misconduct resolution at international and regional conferences and directs the International Center for Academic Integrity Southeast Consortium. And we're not here to listen to me talk. So without further delay, I'm going to hand it off to you, Michael. Welcome.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Good afternoon to everyone listening, and thank you to Turnitin.com for the opportunity to give this presentation. My name is Michael Goodman, and it is my privilege to talk with you all today about my favorite part of working in the field of academic integrity, namely the opportunity we have as educators to go beyond teaching subject-specific knowledge to impart a sense of community, responsibility, and especially ethics. I have worked in the field of academic integrity at Kennesaw State University in the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia for the last 17 years, rising from being the department's first undergraduate student assistant to my present rank as Assistant Director for Academic Integrity. This means I've had the chance to see academic integrity from two perspectives simultaneously, student and staff. Moreover, because I earned my bachelor's and master's degrees from KSU, the ethical culture and reputation of the university has direct impact on the ongoing value of my work. When I invariably get asked the basic small talk question, so what do you do? I tell people that I'm a university administrator who deals with student honor, that I try to keep 33,000 students honest. After the laugh, wide eyes, and or is that all comments, the usual follow-up question is some form of, you mean like catching and punishing cheaters and people who plagiarize? I find it interesting that people so often jump to that particular aspect of my job instead of thinking about the ways I also work to deter misconduct and proactively promote integrity. The first impulse seems to be to view honor through the lens of infractions and punishments for those infractions. Honestly, though, I can't blame people for assuming my work mostly deals with punishing dishonest students. Years ago, one of my colleagues compared our work as conduct officers with the duties of firefighters, albeit notably safer. We are the ones who must rush in and put out the fire of each academic misconduct incident. His metaphor stuck with me, and I have given it much thought since. Sadly, my own experience is that these sort of fires spring up on my campus on such a regular basis that I must constantly react and extinguish. A firefighter who does not actually fight fires is worthless. But if it is my foremost responsibility to ensure that people and possessions don't burn, I can't stop there. We can't stop there. If all we do is put out flames in a combustible environment, it is inevitable that another fire will rage there soon. Therefore, it is also our responsibility to clear away known fire hazards and thus make it harder for flames to spring up easily and grow swiftly. Proactive approaches must accompany reactive action to achieve our desired goal. Now let's fold the firefighter metaphor back into a direct examination of what it means to work in academic integrity. We must react to the misconduct students engage in. We must also act in all ways possible to prevent misconduct by reducing opportunities for students to cheat and implementing deterrent strategies like having multiple versions of tests and so forth. But even that isn't enough. Whether deterring or sanctioning misconduct, those aspects of the job only look at negatives, at wrong behavior. We try to stop people from doing the wrong things, and that's a worthy goal, certainly. But the other important half of our responsibilities lie in addressing academic integrity through a positive lens by cultivating the right behavior and right thinking, which leads to the right decision making. So, why do we cite? Why do we give credit to the ideas and efforts of others when we draw upon them? Why is cheating a problem? Why is academic integrity as a whole important? These aren't rhetorical questions, even for ourselves. If you're listening to me right now, it stands to reason that academic integrity matters to you strongly. Thus, it also stands to reason that you have an instinct that says we don't cheat or plagiarize because that is dishonest, and dishonesty is wrong. I am confident that you all know with every fiber of your being that doing your own work is critical to learning. But not everyone is like you and me. We must remember that issues of academic integrity aren't always as obvious to all our students as they are to us. So let's stop taking this stuff for granted. Let's look at the principles actually at play. We teach people because we understand that knowledge is power, that knowledge empowers. We teach because our world and society is too complex to navigate without being taught how to do so. So if that is our goal, other goals necessarily arise from that. If we want to successfully teach important knowledge and skills, we need some way to measure whether that teaching is successful by assessing our students after the instruction has taken place. Thus, we have tests. More broadly speaking, though, all assignments are tests. Each assignment is a way to measure what a student knows. There are other reasons to test, though. If someone is trying to determine who is a good teacher, it's worth knowing how well previous students have learned from that instructor. This facilitates basic social trust. In an interdependent society in which we rely on others to have knowledge and skills we lack, we need some measure of confidence that the people we deal with truly have the expertise advertised. If we go to a doctor, we put our lives in that person's hands because we trust her to know what she is doing. Within this framework, cheating is a problem because it damages that trust and subverts the effectiveness of tests to accurately measure learning. Let's go further. The fact that honesty is necessary for accurately assessing student learning isn't the only ethical consideration. There's also fairness, that abstract notion that people intuitively dislike other people getting an unearned advantage. Yes, self-interest is involved there to the extent that competition exists. However, social trust is intrinsically a matter of people engaging in cooperation for the benefit of all. So the resentment people feel towards those perceived to have unfair advantages creates animosity and breaks down society. Harm is therefore done. In keeping with the title of this presentation, citation is also a matter of fairness. When we work hard and accomplish goals, we want to receive credit for our actions. We want our contributions remembered and known. We want to know that our positive legacies, however small, might linger past us. As students, we learn from those who have gone before us. We learn from the words they have crafted, from the original ideas they have added to a chain of scholarship stretching back to the beginning of civilization and reaching forward unto untold future generations. As my colleague at Turnitin.com, Sean Tupa, succinctly noted, citation is the genealogy of thought. It is an ancestry that people may be proud of no less than they feel pride in their actual ancestry. In spite of assertions to the contrary, there are always new things under the sun, new knowledge to discover, and new conclusions to be drawn. With each new link, knowledge grows to potentially enrich everyone with access to that knowledge. Each student in the chain is privileged a little more than the students before her, able to draw upon a deeper pool of scholarship. The progress we have made as a species, and even more as a civilization, is extraordinary and utterly predicated on this cumulative aggregation of thoughts. Fairness must then demand some measure of gratitude for our academic forebears, recognizing the giants on whose shoulders we sit. And practically speaking, that credit is necessary to follow the chain back, to see the thought process that culminates in the latest link. Stripping academic integrity down to the basic underlying tenets lets us examine how we're teaching these ideas. First, we craft rules to safeguard what we feel is ethically important, charting out a clear box of thou shalt not commandments to make it as easy as possible to behave correctly and not risk getting in trouble. By spelling out these rules rather than asking students to derive them from abstract principles, we cut down on misunderstandings and incorrect interpretations, making it easier for people to behave appropriately. Second, we publicize our rules to our students so they have a reasonable opportunity to know what is expected of them. Third, we consistently enforce our rules and impose consequences on rule breakers, sending a message to the broader community that we are serious about our rules. These are all good deterrents and good forms of education to provide. But if we're really doing the best we can, our fourth course of action must be to actively explain and discuss our rules with all students early in their academic careers, and then have those conversations again and again to reinforce the message across all curricula. Ideally, just making rules information available should be sufficient, but if compliance with rules is the real end goal, then educators should take every opportunity to give students the requisite knowledge. For those of you who are parents or have babysat small children, you will all know all about the terrible twos and how well named that label really is. On the one hand, it's a delight to see the curiosity of children at that age. Everything is new and interesting to them. On the other hand, it can be extremely frustrating to deal with a seemingly endless chain of why questions in response to each and every command. I think it's likely we're all guilty of breaking that chain of why with some variant of because I said so, or because that's just the way it is. We have to draw the line somewhere, after all, or spend all our time explaining. But let's think about the because I said so answer for a moment. Look at your own experiences. When we offer no explanation for what we tell young children to do, the only motivation they have to obey is the perceived authority of the person issuing the orders. That can certainly be enough, but to the extent that children comply with rules because they actually want to, and not just because they are told to, they need something more. They need some rationale that makes sense, some rationale that makes the rule in question more than an abstract notion. We can't go down the why rabbit hole indefinitely, but we can and should give answer to the first layer of that questioning at a bare minimum if we truly want to maximize our odds of securing desired compliance. Now, I know our students aren't babies, particularly in higher education. However, the same fundamental logic applies. We can tell students what the rules are, and that will be enough to get many students to follow those rules. Yet if they don't know why the rules are there, they don't have any emotional or personal investment in compliance. That likely means a lower degree of dedication to the rules. And worse, far too many students will outright disregard rules that feel arbitrary to them. I wish I had a magic solution for you. I don't, but you knew that. We haven't found a magic solution in thousands of years of formal education, and it seems unlikely that will change. Cheating has always plagued us. It probably always will. To be perfectly blunt, some students are fundamentally dishonest, and there is nothing we can do about that. These students have no qualms about taking any shortcuts they believe they will get away with, deterred only by the fear of getting caught and punished. All I can do is be grateful that fundamentally dishonest students comprise a small minority of the total student body. I truly believe that the majority of students are fundamentally good people who want to do the right thing. I believe they want to learn, even if they also want the benefits of the credentials they are seeking. I believe most students have character, and because they have character, we can help them internalize the values underneath our integrity rules. We must remember that there are multiple paths to building character. Some students walk the path of honesty faithfully, choosing at every point to do the work asked of them without taking shortcuts. These are wonderful students, and merely knowing they exist boosts my morale. What I also know is that we are all human, all fallible. Anyone can have a bad day. Anyone can make a bad decision, whether a lapse of judgment or a lapse of character. I believe a person's character is defined less by the mistakes she makes than the way she chooses to respond to those mistakes. In practical terms, every time we discover that a student has engaged in academic misconduct and confront her about the violation, we have an opportunity to do far more than punish a transgression. We have a chance to intervene by talking about what went wrong and why it went wrong and why the action breaches integrity. We have a chance to examine whatever poor decisions led to the misconduct. We have a chance to discover if the student is in crisis or needs resources our school can mobilize on her behalf, hopefully taking away some of the stress and desperation that drives so much misconduct. We have a chance to look at all the mitigating and exacerbating factors at play in each case when determining appropriate consequences. We have a chance to offer a moment of grace to students who take ownership of their misconduct and work with us, thereby empowering us to temper justice with mercy. Most of all, we have a chance to see and recognize a student's humanity by treating her with dignity and respect, drawing a clear line between a behavior that is unacceptable and a condemnation of her character. The fact remains that we cannot make disciplinary meetings into teachable moments because we cannot control whether students will seize such opportunities. What we can do is deliberately craft opportunities for teachable moments. Such efforts are a powerful complement to the instruction we must offer in the classroom. Part of the teachable moment process is selecting sanctions that are fundamentally developmental in nature. It is all well and good and appropriate for assignments containing academic misconduct to receive grade penalties, or for students to see final course grades lowered for more serious infractions. If choosing the wrong action has no consequence, what incentive is there to change? But penalties only teach the lesson that actions have consequences. We need more tools in our toolkit. I believe there is significant value in having some form of workshop or other form of dedicated ethics training available as an option. Sometimes making students redo work with a penalty can afford them a chance to practice the skills the assignment was intended to develop before they attempt more challenging coursework with even higher expectations. To all my fellow firefighters, I deeply understand and respect your struggles. I know there is always misconduct to deal with at our campuses, and that resolving such incidents is absolutely mission critical. But I promise you that efforts to teach rules with a Y attached makes a difference. Teaching across curricula and beyond makes a difference, whether in orientation speeches, presentations to student groups and classrooms, or especially in cultivating those teachable moments within disciplinary meetings. The more an institution hits a message of integrity from every angle, the more the message becomes a defining element of campus culture. It should go without saying that you cannot build a campus culture alone. You need allies to make any sort of comprehensive integrity campaign. You need faculty champions. You need administrative support from the top. You need student support, even if only in the context of student government or other campus leaders. You also need to be creative. Work with your Student Disability Services Office to craft messaging optimized for those with learning disabilities. Work with your International Student Support Office to bridge cultural differences and prevent tragic misunderstandings. The broader your coalition, the easier it becomes to add to that coalition, and the more likely that resources can be pooled toward the endeavor. On the flip side, remember that building anything large takes time and requires many small steps. Don't overwhelm yourself with impossibly large goals. Build alliances, one by one, in bite-sized pieces, using each new ally as a beachhead from which to launch more partnerships. Don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. Look to what other schools have done and learn from them. We academic integrity professionals are a friendly community. We like to help each other. In summary, clear academic integrity rules are critical to helping students avoid misconduct, but rules alone are insufficient. We must speak early and often about the principles that live beneath those rules. We must teach students to conceive of themselves as more than passive recipients of knowledge, but rather the latest links in a chain of scholarship that will extend past them. We must teach them to see that it is also their own research and hard work that citation exists to protect and respect. We must hope for and work toward outcomes that grow offenders into better students, maybe even better people, all while never losing sight of the need for accountability. Consequence. We must find allies who will remember that our power as educators to help nurture student ethics imposes upon us a responsibility to do so. Thank you for your attention, and best wishes to you all as you go forth. Do good and nurture goodness. I am now ready for questions.
Thank you very much, Michael, and makes me feel good to be quoted in a presentation. But yes, questions, everybody, please type them into the pod. We've had a few come in already, and as Michael answers them, please send more comments and questions. The first one, Michael, comes from Christopher, and he asks, what about the cultural aspect of borrowing from others?
Well, this is certainly one of those issues where sensitivity to and awareness of cultural distinctions is going to be critical. And that's going to be true whether we're talking about international students that are coming to study under us and under our expectations, or the reverse as we go out forward into the world. So in some places, with a more collective approach to knowledge and who owns that knowledge, then there are going to be different expectations. And one of our challenges when we're dealing with students who come from such backgrounds is to sell them on why is this different and why is that different something that matters to us? Why is it something possibly good? And so to that extent, it is so critical to maintain this dialogue, to do as I said about speaking early and often, and to recognize then these students who've traveled halfway around the world presumably are pretty serious about their studies. And if we just give them the tools to understand what we want of them, they're probably going to be able to live up to that. As to the second question I see here, and a student recently challenged the person about need to attribute his own perspectives with "I believe" or "in my view," since it should be assumed that he's the writer of anything that isn't attributed to an outside source. Well, my general rule of thumb that I will tell students is if it didn't come out of your brain, tell us whose brain it came out of. That's the fundamental level. If it's yours, it's yours. If it's not yours, it's not yours. And if you've done the research that leads into this, you know what that is. I never go after students for plagiarism charges on technicality. If I can see the good faith effort, then it's there. But in the context of dealing with a student saying, well, but this is mine, it should be assumed to be mine, that can sometimes dovetail back into issues of self-plagiarism to make sure that they are doing original work for this and not simply drawing upon something they've had previous, at least not without permission. And it can be a situation where a dialogue with that individual is needed to say, yes, you are going to present ideas. These are going to be things of yours, but we also need it to work within a certain academic writing format that will enable you to make your points in the most effective way possible. As we set students up for success and as we make it clear to them that we're setting them up for success rather than confronting them in any manner, in a hostile manner about it, then that tends to ease them in as people who can buy in. As for positive reinforcement, which I think was the next sort of question for it, that part of the positive reinforcement is the encouragement, is the valuing that we place upon student work to say this matters, this is another link in the chain. This isn't just you doing some busy work or exercise for it. Praise is important. We need to provide critical comments and revision notes and all of those things to writing, but praise is something that, the right kind of praise, that really does matter to people. If we're presenting a positive message to them, then that's reinforcing what they're doing. I'm a little bit loath to suggest something to the effect of, well, giving some sort of rewards for those who don't get in trouble, for those who are just doing what they're supposed to do. But you can work in possibilities for students who want to be more active than that, for those who might want to be ambassadors of this program. That gets back to recruiting allies. If you can get student buy-in with student leaders, with people who have been won over to see that this is a big deal, perhaps even people who've gotten in trouble, had a positive experience out of it, learned from it, grown from it. These are people that you can use to spread your message and which you can provide references for and any number of rewards that might look good on a resume. But it's something where creative approach is definitely warranted. Now, next question was, how do you maintain good cheer, respect, and most respectful interpretation of the incident? How do you avoid battle fatigue? Burnout is a real issue. And what I would say, though, is when you have these kinds of meetings, when you have these kinds of incidents that you're dealing with, then if you are successful, if you get the student to a point where you've received the feedback that they get it, they understand what the problem was, they express some measure of remorse for it, they express a willingness to do better, to change from this, to learn from this. For me, at least, that's the kind of thing that leaves me more recharged after meetings of this nature than more drained. But that's not always possible. And honestly, I would tell all my colleagues, have a good therapist, have a good relationship with your therapist, because you're going to see stories that are tragic. You're going to see stories that hurt your heart. And having someone you can talk with about that is pretty critical to your own mental health. It's also worthwhile to remember we are a community as academic integrity professionals, as educators, and without breaking FERPA or breaking confidentiality, nothing stops us from talking with colleagues about the kinds of situations we're in and the toll that might take on us. And having someone to reinforce, yeah, I've been there, or this is a strategy I used, it helps us feel not alone. And I think that camaraderie is pretty critical. As for the slides, I would be glad to make sure that they're made available. I'll be talking with Sean to make sure that if there's any additional information he'd like me to expand on with it once he's had a chance to review everything so that I can give you the best quality product possible. As for resources for teaching citation, I think it's almost too many to list. There are, I think maybe that would be better addressed for me to go through and maybe provide a few links to it later on. So Sean, if you can make sure that I am reminded to answer that question more thoroughly, I want to make sure that I'm giving it proper attention it deserves.
We can provide links to those resources in the follow-up email to the presentation.
Perfect. And I do think that pointing students to real-life scenarios is critical. Again, it comes back to making it real. But it's not just about, hey, how did this work in the real world, for whatever that means. It's also about making it real at that academic level. I will often tell a story about how I was caught cheating in my senior year of high school, how I went into a test I was not ready for, and 10 minutes before I panicked, I threw together a small cheat sheet, and not having any experience at cheating, I was terrible at it and got caught in the first 5 minutes. But I was treated with dignity and respect. A line was drawn between a behavior and a condemnation of character. And so when I speak to students and I am paying forward how I was treated, I am telling them I understand what it's like to be on the other side of the table. And I respect the challenges that you're in, and I respect that hopefully you want to do more, you want to be better, and I want to help give you that chance. The next question was measuring impact across for our office's efforts. Well, the massive outreach efforts I have done to get faculty to utilize our process, take advantage of the multi-partiality of our facilitators when we're dealing with those first offense cases and students and faculty are meeting. It is what I saw was about 2 years ago I had 316 cases that ultimately went to record. The last year I had 424. And that kind of a surge, pretty positive, was not because we're suddenly having more dishonest students, but rather because we are seeing that rise in detection and reporting. But anecdotally, I can say that I have letters sent to me or people who visit me pretty much every year who I've dealt with previously, who come back to say, getting caught, dealing with this, being treated this way, having this moment of opportunity to grow was one of the best things that happened to me. And I also, this goes back to morale and burnout, I keep a hope file in my desk. I keep every one of those things, every positive statement that professors or students make, I print them out and I put it in there. And sometimes when things are particularly hard, I pull my hope file out and I go through it, and it recharges me. Next person was saying about working in an Asian country where plagiarism is widespread in academia and tacitly sanctioned by teachers. In this context, communicating the value of academic and honesty is difficult beyond the superficial level. Have I had experience of workable approaches, strategies, and examples that work with students from such backgrounds? This is challenging, and I sort of touched on this a little bit earlier for it. I think it's all the more critical when we are dealing with a potential cultural divide to get to those whys, to look at the principles that live underneath them. And part of the message can be, all right, we value what you are doing. And sometimes that's been a hard message sometimes for these students to internalize. This isn't just you learning and regurgitating what you've been told. This is you being a link in that chain. And I've seen so many moments when a student, when it finally dawned on them and that light just went up in their eyes and they saw, wow, what I have to say matters. And suddenly citation made a whole lot more sense to them. But it's something that you need to understand is going to be a challenge and something that is going to be a significant struggle that will not stop being a significant struggle. The best you can hope to do is to reach students over and over again and impress upon them why this helps them, why this is worth it, and how this dovetails into the kinds of scholarship and perhaps expectations that may live if they want to be working in the broader global community. I work with, at my school, I deal with undergraduate students, master's level students, and Unfortunately, every once in a blue moon, even doctoral level students who have gotten in trouble. I also reach out to all possible departments that will ever have me come in, speak, work with them, do anything I can. I'm always trying to build those partnerships. At graduate level, I don't see much in the way of plagiarism that's just straight up cut and paste. I do see a lot more in the way of sloppy citations, and sometimes that's sloppiness at the level of just being an academic issue. Sometimes it rises to the level of being an academic integrity issue. But by and large, they at least know the basics of it. But we started to say, why are we making assumptions? And some of the graduate programs, and there are graduate orientations now, where we're saying, okay, probably you know these things, but on the off chance you don't, on the off chance you weren't prepared by your previous institution in these ways, let's go ahead and not make assumptions. Let's go ahead and hit these rules and talk about them, but talk about them to you as grad students and talk to you as peers who we assume will be interested and want to know and want to comply. I find that graduate students, when approached as peers who we're trying to empower rather than as students that we are inculcating with knowledge, that tone can make such a significant difference in getting their buy-in and attention. The next question says, I recently had a situation with a student regarding potential plagiarism. It appeared the student had simply pasted information into an assignment asking for explanation about a particular topic. What the student pasted was essentially correct, but when I questioned him, he freely admitted he searched the internet and found the information. When I told him he shouldn't paste someone else's work, but rather put it in his own words. I was surprised when he said to me, well, why would I do that? It would take more time and I couldn't say it any better than what I found. How would I respond? And the question is, how would I respond to this situation? This is a great one because I deal with this all the time. And the value of paraphrasing is if you use a quote well, you're saying, I know that this person knows what they're talking about. Or you're saying, I think this person doesn't know what they're talking about, and then you analyze it in. But when you paraphrase, you are saying, I know what I'm talking about. You have showed that you have internalized that knowledge. And so it isn't just that it's good from the stance of practicing that skill as part of writing overall. Paraphrasing is stronger writing than using direct quotes. And it's the kind of writing that's going to lead to students getting better grades. And generally, they want the better grades. I also recognize that sometimes for students, they are not looking at paraphrasing as something that's intuitive to them. So I point out, hey, the first thing you need to know from this is that you shouldn't be intimidated by the fact that what you say and how you say it isn't going to sound as polished as this person, this scholarly expert. Because if you're using them as an expert, chances are very good that they've spent years, if not decades, researching that topic, writing about that topic. But I guarantee you they didn't sound like that when they were undergraduates either. So it is by taking that skill, by grappling with that skill, by grappling with the understanding that comes from having to internalize it, that the knowledge is best absorbed and that that absorption is best demonstrated. And if you can appeal to the mercenary nature of students who want the best grades possible, and if that's what works, then great. But the logic of it is something that does escape them, and it's worth pointing out. How do we cite information from a book or journal article given to us through conversation? That's really a technical question that will depend upon what style you're using, MLA, APA, others. I freely admit that I am not an expert in terms of memorizing those kinds of guidelines. I'm currently on my 4th MLA handbook, having used the previous 3 through my studies until the pages were falling out. And to this day, I don't know how to do a basic single-author works cited entry from memory, but I know exactly where to find it in the book. And that's part of what I tell students. Look, if the Assistant Director for Academic Integrity isn't memorizing these things, certainly we're not expecting you to, but we are expecting you to apply them, to use them. And so those kind of questions are good questions, but probably need to be directed by consulting the manuals in question. Next question is, what are the best recommendations and tips for helping international students develop healthy paraphrasing skills that will be self-initiated after the meeting with Academic Integrity Committee members? Okay, expanding on what I just said, the first thing is to tell them, don't be intimidated by this. It's okay that you don't sound as polished as them. The second piece is to say, it is virtually impossible to write a paraphrase of text while you are staring at the text. certainly I know I can't do it. While you're staring at that text, those words are dominating your understanding. Those words are filling up your mind. And so you need to read this small bite-sized piece of information you want to paraphrase, something no more than a few sentences. And then, having read it, you put it out of sight, and you just put down what you remember, just the thoughts. No worrying about spelling or grammar or punctuation or any of that. But once that's down there, then you tidy it up, put it into complete sentences. And then the most important step is going back and looking at what you were trying to paraphrase and comparing the two, reconciling the two. It may be that you've left something out that's critical and that needs to go in there. It may be that you've distorted it. You haven't quite gotten it right. It may be in such doing you may have added something that wasn't quite there. But it also could be the case that some of those words just got lodged in your mind and you repeated them verbatim without even meaning to. Now, if you're allowed to use quotes, then if it stuck with you like that, odds are it's going to stick with your reader like that, and maybe that's a good quote. But if the goal is to paraphrase, then if you find that the reconciling says these are not the same thing, these are not fundamentally the same ideas, then you go back through that loop as many times as it takes until you are satisfied with it. And I tell students, yes, that's initially a slow process, but it gets faster and faster and faster the more you do it. And it's the kind of thing where if you follow through those steps, you're going to be able to get it done in a way that's acceptable. Next question is, what happens when our own teacherly ethos guides us to see these as teaching moments, but our institution or department is focused on catching students being dishonest? This is challenging. Part of it comes back to trying to spread a culture, and that's not just to students, but to others, to pitch, why does this matter? It can be helpful to point back to best practices that are being taught by professional organizations like the International Center for Academic Integrity or some of the luminaries within the field who can speak to the importance of a developmental approach and why that developmental approach is beneficial. But that developmental approach doesn't have to exist as solely an alternative to the we need to catch things that are going on, because I think we can all agree that if there's misconduct going on, we need to be looking at it. We need to catch it and we need to deal with it. We need to do that for the sake of the students. We need to do that for the sake of our institutions and the value of our degrees. So catching things is important. Like I said, my big outreach efforts over the past few years jumped me up from 316 cases to 424 in the span of a year. That's definitely a notable increase in detection and in reporting and in catching. And that's good. We want the numbers to go up before the numbers are going down so that truly it's representative of something getting better rather than things being swept under the rug. But it is a situation where we can talk and say, all right, we are catching these things. We value catching these things. We want to hold students accountable. But what does that look like? Can we hold them accountable? Can we give them consequences, but also grow them in ways that are going to decrease the chances that they're going to be a repeat offender? And if you have to sell that on mercenary grounds, you sell that on mercenary grounds. You say, look, the more that we make this a teachable moment, the fewer of these kinds of repeat cases we're going to deal with, and the fewer students we might have to suspend or expel, and thereby affecting retention, graduation rates, and so forth. So you use whatever argument you've got for it. But I think it's important that above all else that you show you're not opposed to the people who are saying, please catch more. You are saying that is necessary, but there is more that is necessary. And by making it an and rather than an or, I think you'll have more success. Some students seem to believe that paraphrasing means copy the author without using quote marks. What and how do you guide them to do better? Again, that loop process and spelling it out and making it a straightforward set of directions that you repeat and repeat is helpful, especially if you're teaching composition at any level. But it's also something I've noticed this one, which is students who are writing in an APA style where they've been told that per the guidelines of APA, they're not supposed to quote. But instead of taking that as, oh, I shouldn't use direct quotes from sources unless I absolutely have to, they're saying, oh, well, I just shouldn't use quotation marks. So if you are teaching in a style where like APA where that's expected, or you personally are expecting paraphrase out of it, then you're going to need to bring that up. But ultimately, think if you are communicating it, the what and the why, you're going to get the maximum buy-in. And it does come back to saying that you have to explain what a paraphrase is, but you also have to explain why a paraphrase is important. And that whole show me what you've learned. Don't just show me that you can find something that's on topic. And if you show me what you've learned, then in the process of doing that, I can assess that knowledge and I can give you the best grade possible out of you having demonstrated that knowledge. It is very vital when looking at the quotes versus paraphrases to talk about when would you want to use a quote. Under what circumstances might that be better than a paraphrase? And then under what circumstances is a paraphrase better? And how are these things different? Sometimes students even just like the notion when I say, all right, if you use a direct quote, you got to use quotation marks and in-text citations and entries in your works cited or reference page. And that's 3 things you got to make sure you've got. But if you paraphrase, you only need 2. You only need to make sure that it's in your own words and you've told us where the ideas came from and you gave us the source at the end so we could find it. So the last question I see here is, do you have experience working with online students who you cannot meet with face-to-face? If so, what are the strategies for working through this issue with online students? All right, I think that breaks into 2 pieces. That breaks into the what are we doing on the front end and what are we doing on the back end. On the front end, this is where helping professors craft the messages that they send to students about expectations can be so critical. I know professors who will often in their syllabi and in the resources for a class list out things that are expected of them, that here are resources to go look at about this is what plagiarism is, this is how to avoid it. Purdue OWL is one of the sources I was going to mention. It's a great reference, a good starting place. And we have the fundamental opportunity here to try to saying it once, saying it in one way isn't enough. Let's come back at it. Let's hammer at it. And when we think, well, we've just been doing that as long as we possibly can here, how can they not get it? Well, there's still going to be some that don't get it. But if you are doggedly persistent about it, and if you check your own assumptions, and if you act in a manner that is rooted in compassion, that is rooted in kindness, and that is rooted in a desire for accountability, then things tend to work out. Not quickly, not easily, but they tend to work out. I have to believe in hope. That's central to doing this. That's why I call it my hope file. I have to believe that we have that chance to make a difference. And I believe it because I've seen that difference made. And I believe it because that difference was made in my life. I had not learned how to study going really into school. I had coasted on being smart. But getting caught cheating, having to face that I had hit a wall where being smart was not good enough, forced me to learn how to study. Forced me to start doing my homework and not just rely on having a 98 test average and a 22 homework average and still managing to get a decent grade. No, I had to study. I had to do my work. And suddenly I went from being a B student to an A student. I got my very first 4.0 my freshman year, first semester, coming out of that experience. So it's easy for me to have hope knowing what can happen and knowing how positively things can happen. And it's also important to cling to that hope, to recognize, to say, it's not always going to go well. It's definitely not always going to go well. And sometimes it's going to go very poorly. But a recognition that every life that we make a difference for, everyone that we reach, has a ripple effect. We put people into higher education because we are trying to train leaders, whether it's into the business community or politics or nonprofits or anything. And while there's some thoughts about the ubiquity of college and whether it's necessary or no and what's the value of that, and that's an important conversation for our society to have, we can at least agree that college is a place to hopefully train leaders. And so if we are training ethical leaders, there is a ripple effect to the world. There is a ripple effect that says if these people are engaging in dishonesty in an academic context, they are more likely to engage in dishonesty in a professional context beyond the school. So if we are going to get them on board with these kinds of ethical principles, it stands to reason that those ethical principles carried forward have the chance to make the world a better place. And we all could stand the world be a better place. So I don't see any other questions right now, but I am grateful for the opportunity to have presented and for the opportunity to answer these questions. If you have further questions, please feel free to route that to the Turnitin folks so that they can get them to me, and I'll do my best to provide responses very soon, along with making sure that you all have the slides. Anything else, Sean?
Well, thank you so much, Michael. I think I mean, a wonderful presentation with a very powerful message as well. And it really, I mean, I think we're all here because we do understand the importance of integrity, but hearing it from you, I think makes that importance all the more realizable. I want to thank the audience for joining us as well. But before we all go, I would like to let everyone know that we do have a special session on this Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific time called Turnitin Feedback Studio, Original Insights, Better Writers. We're going to be giving you a sneak peek at the enhancements that we've made to Turnitin. And it's got a new intuitive interface, much more cohesive look and feel to it. I think that everybody would be very pleased with it, and if you want to learn more, please join us this Friday. And I also hope to see all of you at our other sessions in the next few days at Writing X Tech. We've got some really fascinating sessions this afternoon from Ginger Berninger and Todd Richards, Teaching the Writing Brain, the connection between neurology and best practices in the classroom on writing instruction. And we hope to see you all there. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Michael, and everyone have a good day.